Hello, hello. How are we looking here? Do I have the picture right? How's my audio, guys? Sorry, still trying to. Oh, I think we're live. Wait. So I'm gonna go to my screen share. We're gonna get started here. Say hello to everyone. Jay, hello Jay. Hello friend. Hello Kumar. Thank you for joining me today. We're gonna jump into the class right now. I may not be able to see your questions, but I appreciate you waiting. Sorry I'm a little late. I had to figure out how to set this up, and also forgive me for the noise. My computer, the fan is going to start running, and it's going to be quite noisy. So if my audio is okay, hopefully you can hear me okay. So let's get started here. All right. So one of the things I want to do in today's class is talk about how to see the major structures of the torso, the anatomical structures, and ways to find them, locate them, and identify them. So it's not going to be a detailed anatomy class by any means. It's not going to be about the anatomy. It's more about observation and how to see and how to know what you're looking for when you draw from life. I think that's a big challenge, is kind of knowing what's there and what to look for. So let's start with what to look for and how we see, what to look for and how we see. So the most important thing that we're looking for in the torso, obviously, are the uh, the the bones, the major bones. In this, there's a lot of bones going on here, but probably the most important that we need to see is the rib cage, and the pelvis, also known as the hip bone. Rib cage and pelvis. I think that's fairly obvious, right? So we want to get very familiar with what these things look like underneath the skin and ways that we can simplify and shorthand them, meaning that, you know, there's a lot of ribs and a lot of cartilage here. We don't want to think of it as individual ribs. We want to think of it as a shape. You know, we want to think of it as a shape that's made up of smaller structures and shapes. Same with the same with the same with the pelvis. We don't want to think of it as a pelvis, which is actually three sections fused together. You want to kind of think of it as a shape. In this case, a box shape works really nice, or a bowl. It's very bowl. It's like a bowl, like a kind of bowl that you eat from. So both of those will work. So rib cage and the pelvis. So later we're going to talk about ways how we can see those on the surface. Sometimes they can be seen, sometimes they can't. So we have to interpret what we see. So rib cage and the pelvis, number one. And probably the second most important thing is obviously the spinal column, which we can't see in front view, but we can see in side view. You can see the spinal column in side view, specifically this guy, which is the vertebrae. And again, the spinal column is made up of individual bones, but we want to think of it as a long tube that has an S curve. So the key about the spinal column is to note and be aware of its curve. It's never straight. It's always curved, and the rib cage attaches like this. And notice that the curve from the rib cage to the attachment of the pelvis or hip bone is also at a curve. We want to become very familiar with the spinal column, its curve, and its basic form, which is a long, thick cylinder or tube. Now in back view, the spinal column is quite obvious in one place, which is this guy, the sacrum. We'll talk about that later, next, soon. Now, so those are the major bones that we look for: spinal column and, rib cage, spinal cord, and the pelvis. Of these two, of those three, rib cage and pelvis, obviously number one and number two. Now, there's secondary things that we look for. Starting with the most obvious is the clavicle or collarbones, and they're always obvious. If you look on the model here, we're right on the surface, so they're very easy to see. So don't need to worry too much about them. I think inherently we all know what those are. When you probably look in the mirror, you can see your own collarbones or your own clavicles. But in the back, there's something that's not as obvious, but very important. And probably, to me, the most important structure in the back is the scapula. The scapula are these triangular shaped bones. Here, let's bring up a back view model. Now, the scapula is important because it drives all of the movement, and once we can correctly learn to identify the scapula and its parts and its clues, it does leave clues as to how you can see it. There are parts where it does come to the surface. Once we can see it, then we can almost construct the entire torso if we can correctly identify the scapula. That's why it's so important. So we'll find ways to identify that. And then at the bottom is the sacrum. This is usually very easy to see too. It leaves a big clue. We'll talk about next. So get to know number one, the rib. Number two, number one, rib. Number 2, pelvis. Number 3, the spine, because it connects the rib cage and the pelvis. Then 4, scapula. And 5 is the sacrum. So these, to me, anatomy is, I approach anatomy not as an artist, but as a medical student. So I just, I, if you eventually want to get to a high quality level, you want to get realism, and especially if you want to teach art someday, you're going to have to, just kind of do your own study and treat it like you're a medical student. You just need to memorize what these are, and as an artist, you'll kind of have to draw and memorize the shape. So that's important right there. That's what we're looking for. So that's the what. Now, obviously, too, there's major muscles involved. And we'll talk about those now. So there's a lot of muscles. There's a lot of muscles. But for me, when we're learning to figure draw, the most important muscle that you need to see is what's called the abdominis rectus in the front. Abdominis rectus. So, when you're doing, if you want to get that six-pack, you want to get abs, ABS, that's what that is. But the abdominis rectus connects the rib cage to the pelvis. That's why it's important. It's kind of like a hinge. It's a joint. So we need to become familiar with that. Of all the muscles, in my mind, this is the most important. And then on the side of the abs, you have what's called the obliques. These are basically the side abs. The abdominis rectus is the front abs. These are the side abs. You'll see these a lot, and you want to get familiar with those. And then on the back, what works similar to the abs is what's called the sacrospinalis or erector spinae. And these are a group of muscles. Now, they're not as flexible as the abs. You can only bend so far backwards. You're not really meant to. And what's important about the erector spinae is that you want to get to know them as a flat tube. They'll appear to be a flat tubular form. There'll be two of them, so you'll see these quite a bit. So when you see that in the back, you're like, man, I see that all the time. These tubular forms, that's the erector spinae or sacrospinalis. And then the front, the abdominal wall is actually very flat. Abdominal wall is very flat. It's literally it's like a wall. It's like a big flat, long shape with tendons here and some muscle there. So these look like tubes. These look like they're flat. So you've probably seen anatomical drawings and photos. You know that you kind of know what these look like. And we'll look at some examples. So that's really the most important muscles. Again, there's a lot of stuff to learn, and a lot of stuff to learn. And I think it's best to learn anatomy kind of on your own. You don't really need to, because it's more of an analytical thing, really, at the beginning. Anatomy is an analytical thing. You want to know what they are, the names, if you want to talk about them, and their general shape. That's the most important thing. So you have to kind of, be a medical student for a little bit, be a science student, and be a scientist, and explore that to become more familiar with them on an analytical level. Okay, so let me jump in the chat and see if there's any questions or comments here. Volume is low. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you, guys. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, how is that? How is this audio? Hello, hello. No, it was working earlier, I think. Yeah, next time I'm going to do this on my phone. Is it better if what if I do... So yeah, it was working before. Hello. Oh, yeah. Hmm. Oh, this is not good. Let's see. Yeah, what's happening is the... sorry about that, I don't quite know how to fix it. I tried to set this up on my phone. Pick up the clicks and the background noise. Well, yeah, I was planning to make a proper pre-recorded video of this. So, forgive me for today. Let's just keep going here. I'll check back. What I'll do is I will, I'm sure the audio is awful. What I'll do is I will, I'll just kind of go over the important points, and then I will stop the Photoshop and we'll just answer questions that way. Okay, so let's just look at some examples real quick, and so I'll talk about what to look for. Basically, what you're looking for okay, number one, on the contour. Number two, on the surface. Right, contour, contour, right, the outer part of the form, and the surface. Surface is in here, surface. So we're going to look for visual clues at the contour and the surface. That's where we look. Now, what we're looking for is really for lack of a better word, bumps and depressions. That's really what I look for, and I think, and also known as what's convex, it's a scientific word, and concave. Basically things, oops, oh, thank God I'm an artist, not a, wait, I am an author. convex, concave. So basically there are things that are raised, they're bumpy, they go up, or there are things that go down. I hope that makes sense. We're looking for bumps and depressions. Now, on the contour, bumps and depressions look like corners. Corners, straights, and direction changes. Bumps and depressions look like corners, straights, and direction changes on the contour. On the surface, they look like light and shadow. They look like highlights and shadow shapes, basically. So when we're on the surface, we're looking for corners, basically things that do this, and things that look and appear straight, things that change direction. Like, for example, here, it goes from here to here. You see that? It went down, then it went out. Down and in, and then out. That's a direction change, that's a corner. So that tells me some anatomical thing is happening there. On the surface, they look like bumps and shadow shapes. Where do we see bumps and shadow shapes? Well, for example, highlights. Here's a nice clear highlight. You all know that's the rib cage. Here's a highlight. That's actually part of the rib. Here's a shadow shape, right? Abdominal. So that's what we're looking for. And it also overlaps. Anything that overlaps is generally anatomy, because overlaps tend to happen where two forms of anatomy meet, and they tend to happen at intersections, joints, or overlaps and intersections. An overlap or an intersection is probably a joint, and lots of anatomy happens at the joint. And for sure at the shoulder, we can see in the back, we'll know that we'll see a lot of overlaps and intersections that will lead us to the scapula. And at the hip, we'll see the trochanter. I forgot to talk about that. It's the bone, head bone of the feet. All right, so that's how we see. We're looking for a rib cage, pelvis, mostly in the back, scapula and sacrum. That's what we're looking for. How we see them is corners, straights, and direction changes of the contour, and highlights and shadow shapes on the surface. So let's just look at some examples. It's best if we look at some examples. Let me check in on the chat room there. Okay, hopefully the noise isn't too bad. Sorry about that, guys. Right. Okay, so I already went over this front view. So we're looking for the rib cage, right? What is the start of the surface, the contour? Here's the direction change. You see that corner? In the shadow side, there's a corner. Here's a corner. There's there's an obvious corner there. That's shoulder joint, obviously. A lot of muscle here. I believe it's called the teres muscle. Okay, so what this tells me, we all know what's happening here, is that there's the bottom of the rib cage is right there. And do I have some more clues about the rib cage? Is there a surface clue? Well, yeah, there's a highlight. And a highlight, and it's a shadow shape. A highlight, shadow shape, what that is a corner on the surface. Here's a little tiny highlight. That's a highlight of this muscle, actually. But that muscle is sitting on top of one of the false ribs, the bottom ribs. So you see how I'm putting all these clues together. And I know, just from experience, that the rib cage is shaped like that. If I have the bottom of it, I know the shape kind of tapers up and in like that. The rib cage is not a box. It's not a perfect cylinder. No, it tapers, meaning it gets smaller at the top. So we know that. What are some clues about the pelvis? Well, we see a shadow shape here, which is an intersection. Shadow shape here, which is the outer edge of the abdominis rectus. And we know the abdominis rectus sits and connects to, see that little highlight and shadow shape? That is called the iliac crest. On this side, I believe, it's a little unclear where his iliac crest is. This is a muscle. I believe it's here. Could be wrong. This one's not too obvious. I'm gonna put it there. Okay, so that's not obvious. It's not necessarily that. But I know I have this side. It's very clear. And right through his crotch and his groin. So I'm assuming that the angle must be like that. So that one's a little tough. But I do see the trochanter. That's the bump of the femur head. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. On the side, so here's obvious rib cage. That's very obvious. These highlights, shadow shape. Shadow shape is a corner, so that's a rib. So very obvious here. On the side, see that shadow shape right there? That's an intersection of the abdominals sitting on top of the spine of the iliac crest, which is the top part of the pelvic bone. Any more clues here? There's a little shadow shape here that reinforces the curve of the spine, and here on the back we have a corner. See that corner? That is clearly the abdominis rectus, sacrospinalis back there. There's a little corner here. That's the bottom of the scapula. In front view, there's an obvious corner. Surface corner, shadow shape. That's clear sign that's the scapula. So this corner here, and changes direction again, so that tells me corner here, so that tells me that this is a rigid bony structure. That's the rib cage. And we can see the ribs here, that's very obvious. This is the pectoralis muscle. So females have that as well, but obviously the breast sits on top of the pectoralis. And how do you see the hip? I can see a very subtle shadow there. Do you see that? That shadow helps me. And I see a very subtle corner. It's very subtle. That tells me that that is the iliac crest. Okay, let's look at . back view there. Okay, so what's obvious here? Obviously, we see the ribs. We see light and shadow shapes on the surface. So we know dimple, back dimples, right? We see them here and here. So what that, and this is the long tubular muscle, sacrospinalis. They always connect to the sacrum and has a triangle. It's also known as a sacral triangle because it looks like a triangle. Connects to the top of the glute, the butt crack opening right there. So that tells me where the spine is, and this tells me that the hip bone must be something like that. So look for these dimples. These dimples and this triangle shape will always lead to the sacrum, which will help you to build and identify the hip joint. All right. Check this in the chat here. How are we doing? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry about that, guys. I'm just gonna go through this real quick. I plan to make a recorded version of this, more polished version of this anatomy lesson here. So, trochanter. Oh, trochanter is that the bone of the pelvis. Excuse me, the leg bone. It's the head of the leg bone, and on this model, it's really obvious. See that bump? And that bump is important because it'll help you to find the pelvis. All right. Let me check the chat. Is there any more questions one more time? So what I'm going to go through is just quickly go through a few examples of Oh, Jay has a good question. Yeah, Jay, I want to go through some examples right now. So sorry about the drop, guys. I'm gonna re-record this lesson as a video so you can be higher quality. But I'll just quickly go through some examples. Anyone who's still here about how to identify difficult poses. Okay, so here's a pose where the arm is covering his body and the leg is covering the body. So let's use some clues to find the rib cage, the pelvis, and the key anatomy. All right, so what clues do we have? Let's see what corners we have. We have a corner there. So it's a curve, but I see a corner. That tells me that something's happening there. There's a corner here. This is obvious. That tells me that two anatomical structures are coming together there. There's a corner here. What about on the surface? Any shadow shapes? Well, we have a little shadow shape here. That tells me that the pelvis is nearby. Obviously, there's this crease of his leg here, and the bottom of the abs. That tells me the pelvis is nearby. The abdominal wall. The belly button always points to the abdominal wall. Center of your chest will point to the sternum, and the clavicles are obvious. There's a little bit of light and shadow I can see here, so that kind of tells me that the rib is around here, and this pinching there tells me that that's the end of the ribs and the beginning of the abdominals. So those are the clues I have. Let's see if I can construct based on the clues I have. So, I have a corner here. And a corner here, and a line there. Abdominal walls here. So that tells me this must be the iliac crest. It's roughly there. The head of the trochanter is there. And his groin, right? His genitals are right here, so that tells me that the pelvis is kind of looking like that. And it's a bowl shape. And you see how I got that? Corner. The genitals here. This is a clear line that indicates the scapula. The trochanter is there. See that little muscle? This muscle this trochanter is covered, but this muscle, see that little bit of shadow, connects to the trochanter, so it's behind his arm. I know it's roughly there. So all of this is kind of giving me in my mind's eye. Of course, I'm drawing in my mind's eye based on experience. Now, as for the rib cage, so we have the sternum. We have some light shadow shapes that are helping me to see the bottom of the rib. This is clearly the side of the rib. This is pectoralis here, so that means this is going to be a little bit higher. Pectoralis is the chest muscle. Pelvic is here. So that tells me that the rib is kind of looking like this. And then the spine, his spine is kind of bending, arching there. So this one's tough. That's why I wanted to put some examples that were more difficult. You really have to know your shapes and be able to draw a skeleton from imagination. Right, so these are the clues that I have, and this is the picture in my mind's eye that I'm building. I hope that helps. Okay, here's a situation you might encounter. These are great questions, Jay Ron. Let me jump back into here, and hopefully I'll try to answer those at the end. He wants to know how to see the hips. So the hips are tough. Okay, so you might have a situation like this where the model is heavy set and she might be wearing clothing. So how do we see anatomy? Okay, what clues do we have? Well, let's look at the surface or the contour. This one's straight in a corner. straight and a corner. Here's a corner. This is the trochanter. Corner, two corners. Here's a sharp corner. That's obviously the trochanter there. Clavicles here. So that tells me that the top of the rib is not here, but that's obvious from my imagination. We can see that. Now, you may not be able to see this on the screen, but I see it in the reference. So her belly button is here. But see this shadow shape? I don't know if you can see that. There's a subtle highlight here. That is her abdominal wall. Obviously, there's more, you know, there's fat on top, but this is clearly the abdominal wall. And we know from this view that it will be there. So these are the clues that I have. So let's see if I can construct the image in my mind's eye of, I can't really see her trochanter or iliac crest either. So we're going to have to use some of the clues as best as we have. So abdominal wall. It's roughly here. This straight tells me that's the rib cage. This corner tells me that's going to be roughly the end of the rib cage there. So I'm just going to, in the center of the chest, tell me the sternum is there, clavicles here. So that tells me that her rib cage looks like this. Looks like that. This I got the rib. Now, the hips is going to be tough, and this may help answer J-Ron's question. So, J-Ron, we know that this is front view. We know that this bump, and this bump, that's the trochanter. So what's the trochanter? It's the head of the femur. It's a big ball. It's a huge, it's the biggest bone on the body. And it's roughly this shape. And it attaches to the pelvis, so I can't really see her pelvis. So these are the only clues I have. So knowing that the rib cage is here, the obliques are going to be like this. I don't really have much of a clue about the obliques. I do have one little clue. You see her finger here? There's a little bit of shadow shape here. Now that shadow shape tells me that the obliques are roughly there. I don't know if you catch that. Finger is here, shadow shape is here, so I can see that that's an intersection of two forms coming together, so I'm assuming that the oblique is roughly there. The oblique is the muscle. So that's the only clue I have right now. So that's an oblique. Which means if the oblique is like this, the abdominal wall is like this, the abdominis rectus, the belly button is here, that means the tendon is here, that means the pubis, which is the front part of the hip bone, so it must be like this. Well, very close. I may not be 100% accurate, but I'm very, very close. So I had to use, really all I had was the trochanter. That little corner, this little corner, and the shape of the abdominal wall is all I had to help me construct the pelvis, and knowing that that's in front view as well. So that's tough. So here's another one. This one may help you as well, J-Ron. All right. So this is tough. This is one where the model I'm going to be wearing clothing. And anatomy is not too obvious, right? You're like, oh crap, where's the rib? Where's the hips? Where's the abs? Oh my God, what do I do? All we really can see is on, we can see that. So let's see what clues we got. All right, do we have any corners? We have a subtle curve, but I see two corners. I see straight and a straight. So that's a corner. I see straight. See this line form goes here, and then it does change direction slightly this way. So that tells me that there's some corner roughly here. Then it changes direction again, right? It goes this way. That's a corner. I see three corners here, here, here. So those are little clues as to where the bone might be. I do see a little bit of the abdominal rectus. So her genitals are here. The abdominis rectus connects to the front of the pelvis, known as the pubis. And at the top it connects to the rib cage. So I really can't see the rib, but I do see her abdominal wall, which means that it kind of ends here. I know because the breast is here, I can see the pectoralis here. So I know that the sternum must be here, and therefore this is the end of the abdominal wall. Therefore, I can comfortably say that that must roughly be the end of the ribs. And this corner is another clue that the ribs are kind of they're going to be about this long right here. And I believe this her lat muscle. Her lat muscle connects to the serratus, or sits close to the serratus, which are the muscles that sit on top of your ribs. So that's all I got. That's really all I got. Now, as far as the pelvis, yeah, this is rough. This is rough. All I have is the abdominal wall. I know her genitals, her groin is roughly here. Roughly here. It's a little bit lower, actually. So that's all I got. I can't really see the iliac crest. Can't really see it. This is tough. There is a subtle thing happening here. I can barely see it, but there's a little tiny shadow here. It's a little tiny shadow. And what that is what's called, it's the hip flexor. It's a muscle. It's a muscle like this. And this is your glute medial. This hip flexor connects to the trochanter. And I know that this corner is roughly going to be where the top of the iliac crest. So this is really all I got. This corner, little tiny shadow. I know that shadow is the hip flexor muscle. So that's all I got. That's all I got down there. This is tough. This is tough. But let's start with the rib cage first. So I have an obvious rib. Well, obvious clavicle, obvious sternum, and not so obvious bottom of the rib. So that's all I got. Abdominal wall. Abdominal wall is important. Abdominis rectus, the front abs, will give me a clue as to where the pubis bone is. That's the part of the one of the three sections of the pelvis. This corner here is a clue that the pelvis is kind of right here. It's kind of all I got. Really, that's all I've got. And I know that anatomical flow, this is the trochanter. Therefore, from here to here must be something like that. So I'm pretty I'm pretty sure I'm close as far as the angle. So this is the front plane of it. This is the side plane of it. Side plane, front. And that's really all I got. It's really all, as best as I can do right now. Because the important thing really is that for me, the important thing is to know that if I were to draw this in my mind's eye, if I can see that this is the size and shape, this is the size and shape, it'll help me gauge the proportion. So it'll help me gauge this distance and then this distance, the width of it. But that's tough. I hope that helps. And I think that's the last example I have. Let me jump back in the chat, see what we're doing, how we're doing here. So Jay Ron, I hope that answers your question. Let me go back to, I think there was one where you had difficulty. Well, let's look at this guy, because this is obvious. That's the obvious trochanter. This is an obvious, here's his iliac crest, because that is a tendon, no, it's a muscle. I believe it's called, oh God, I just looked this muscle up last night. Tensor fasciae lata. It's a muscle. His abdominal wall, if the model is lean, the abdominal wall will help us to draw the actually, let's not do that. It's better. Because this model is so lean, the abdominal wall and the front, the pubis bone obviously is here, his groin is there. Even me, I still am not 100% clear about the pelvis is kind of complex, so in my mind I just draw it as a bowl. I just draw it as a bowl. That's really what it is. It's a bowl to hold your organs. It's a big bowl, really. And then at the bottom, it has a little opening for the trochanter. So this is like my shorthand form of it. So I would, and then at the back, it has a little bit of a tail at the back for the that's the sacrum. So I would get used to drawing it as this shape, as a bowl. So you want to draw the bowl from any angle. Hope that makes sense. It's a bowl. Here's this one is obvious too. That's his iliac crest. That's his trochanter. So from here I can basically construct. That's called the gluteus medius. It's the side glute, the smaller glute. And here's his genitals are here, so that means the pubis is like that. So that's how I can see it in side view. And what's happening here, if you want to be more detailed, because the spinal cord is here. Hope that helps there. It's really about, like I was saying, you kind of have to look at it as a medical student and really become familiar with the bones first, and then the major muscles that attach to these bones, the ones that are obvious. Once you have that, you'll be good to go. Okay, so yeah, thank you all for your comments. Sorry about the video quality and the sound quality. I'm going to produce this as a proper lesson. Thank you for the feedback, Craig and J. Ron. Um, if you guys want an app to help you study, I would download an app called Essential Skeleton. It has a nice, it's great for bones, and it's free. It's free. It's an app I use on my phone. That's how I got this image. Where is it? Oh, anyway, yeah, these images. These images came from an app called Essential Skeleton. It's a really nice model they use. It's very clear, and the app is free. What I would do is I would just draw from the three angles and then draw them in perspective. Oh yeah, I mean whatever app, if the Scaly app works, I would use that too. I've never seen it. All right, thank you guys for staying online with me. Sorry about the cut off there and the audio quality. And I'll be back online tomorrow. Thank you for all your comments and questions. I'll be back. I'll stream tomorrow with. I'll use my phone so the quality will be much better. All right, thank you. Thank you for coming online, and I'll see you next weekend. Take care, everyone. Be careful out there, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.